Class is now in session. I am Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing Game 21 of the regular season for the San Jose Sharks as they took on the Dallas Stars and lost by a score of 5-2. And on the scoreboard, it might seem as though the Stars came in here and easily took care of business, but it was actually a couple of empty net goals that make this game look more lopsided than it actually was. In reality, this was just a one-goal game that the Sharks just barely lose out on, 3-2. And the Sharks can actually be somewhat proud with the performance they put up here tonight. I won't go so far as to say that they were the better team. I'll give the slight edge to the Dallas Stars in that area, but I think the Sharks did a good job of really hanging around here and holding their own against a team that on paper should be significantly better. And in the past, when the Sharks do this against better teams, it's usually because those better teams, they're half asleep and they just don't really show up to play very well, and the Sharks are able to take advantage. But I thought while the Stars may not have brought their A game, that they looked quite good, and yet the Sharks, they responded in kind. However, what was the major difference maker here is, as per usual, the Sharks shooting themselves in the foot with these unforced errors, these defensive and neutral zone turnovers that lead directly to all three of these Dallas Stars goals for. That's what is a major thing, along with just the general talent level, that separates a team near the bottom of the standings like the Sharks and a team near the top of the standings like Dallas. Now, but with all that being said, as I mentioned, the Sharks should be pretty happy with how this game played out, at least until the last few minutes of this third period. I'll get to that a little bit later. We start off in the first, though, with a Jason Robertson goal to make it 1-0 Dallas. The Sharks would tie it up with a shorthanded goal from Mikael Granlund, a really nice one. It is 1-1 at the end of 20 minutes. In the second period, the Sharks do not come out very strong, kind of similar to their beginning of the second and last game against Detroit, and the Stars take advantage. They get a goal from Johnston to make it 2-1, and then eventually a goal from Ben, and it is 3-1 at the end of 40 minutes. However, we have seen a never-say-die attitude from the Sharks this year, even against pretty good teams like the New York Rangers. They're always in these games, even if they're down a goal, a couple of goals, 3 goals plus. You know they're going to be able to push. And while at the beginning of this third period it's a small trade of chances either way, it is eventually Jake Wallman who breaks through and brings this game to within 1. But that's where things do begin to break down, not for the Sharks, but for the officiating crew here tonight. Rarely do I talk about the officiating of any game through the first 20 that the Sharks have played. I don't think I've even brought it up once, but here tonight it needs to be said because it was really just a disaster on the ice. It starts with the Mikael Granlund situation a minute or two after this Wallman goal. Granlund gets sandwiched by a couple of Dallas Stars players, including Lyubushkin, who seems to hit him up high with this hit. Should have been a very easy call for the referee, but that's not really what I am fully upset about. You know, calls get missed, and even though this one was particularly egregious, it happens. But what I am very upset about is the fact that Granlund drops to the ice and he remains on the ice for multiple seconds, and the referee refuses to blow the whistle here. And then he slowly gets up and labors his way towards the Sharks bench. The Sharks are forced to play 5-on-4 for a good 15 seconds at this point, and it leads to a good breakaway chance for Tyler Seguin, who almost puts the game to rest with a shot that ends up just barely hitting off the post on his breakaway chance. This should have been absolutely blown down, and you might be thinking, well, the referee, he wants to keep the flow of the game going and not break the momentum and yada yada yada. But we saw twice earlier this game the referees blow the play down on these exact type of situations. It is Matt Dumba who gets hit with a puck up high. It is actually Willie Meckland who flags down the trainers and the officiating to blow the whistle here because Dumba seemed like he might be injured, though there was no actual injury there. And then just, I don't know how later on this was, but a bit later on in the game, it is Eklund on a follow-through of a shot who gets a stick up high to Thomas Harley, who drops to the ice, remains down for a few seconds. This is not a penalty because it's on the follow-through, and yet the referee is still quick again to blow the play down because, oh no, Harley is lying down on the ice, he might be injured. And again, there was zero problem with him. But then when it is Mikael Granlund who gets hit by 2 players, including to the head by one of them, and then remains on the ice for a few seconds, the referee's got his hands in the pocket like, I didn't see anything. And that is just disastrous look for the officiating crew. Like I said, it's not so much the missed penalty, but the follow-up of what ends up happening. But it doesn't end there, the disastrous last few minutes, because then we get to the point where the Sharks have their goaltender pulled, and unfortunately it is without Granlund, because while he was fit to return, the the concussion spotter pulls him off because, again, he got hit in the head with zero call. The Sharks, they get a good chance. It's Macklin Celebrini. He feeds Alex Wennberg right in front for a good opportunity, and then Wennberg takes a huge slash from Roope Hintz right in front of the net. Zero call again, and then, of course, a couple of empty netters end up getting scored, and the game is put away. So a very embarrassing last few minutes for the officiating crew here tonight. They did not handle this one at all, and while I won't say that this game was stolen away from the Sharks, they obviously should have had a much better opportunity given to them. When it comes to the players to talk about, we have the Sharks' top line, the Lund line, Eklund, Granlund, Zetterlund. Of course, no changes to the lineup at all after the great performance, their best of the year, the other night against Detroit. So these three players, they remain together. We start off with Mikael Granlund. I talked about in my grading video how Granlund has yet to really have a takeover type of performance since that game against the Utah Hockey Club, that miraculous comeback off of his fantastic work there. Until here tonight, where I think maybe he watched my grade and he said, hey, you know what, I can show up and I can play well, because he was by far the Sharks' best player. I think what really made the difference here is that the Stars, they are a very suffocating defensive team, and I think a lot of the younger players, like Celebrini and Smith, but even slightly more experienced guys like Eklund and Zetterlund really struggled with how well the Stars were playing from a defensive standpoint. There was not a lot of space out there, but a player like Granlund, who is more of a veteran guy, he knows he's very experienced in the NHL, he knows when he can take that advantage. It wasn't every single shift in which Granlund was making play after play after play happen, but when he saw his openings, he was able to take them. We saw on this shorthanded goal, great work by him, his hard work and his tenacity to fight off the couple of players behind him to still get a really good chance and goal off of a great goaltender that the Stars do have there in Dallas. But then also the setup on the Jake Wallman goal is a great pass. He had a couple of other great plays as well, one right in front of the net to William Eklund with like that behind the back type of play that Eklund was unable to get his stick on. So really nice set of moves here from Mikael Granlund throughout this entire night. He was, like I said, by far the Sharks' best player, which is what makes it even more unfortunate that he wasn't able to play those last couple of minutes. When it comes to the other two players here, we have Eklund, we have Zetterlund. Obviously, they were a small step behind Granlund in this game, but not by that much. As I mentioned, not a lot of space to work with. So for instance, Eklund, who has frequently had a lot of success working pucks below the goal line, he didn't really manage to do that as much. He had to slightly adapt his game. There weren't as many of those easy passes to the slot that have been working against the weaker defensive teams the Sharks have faced as of late, like Detroit and Pittsburgh. But I still think he actually looked pretty decent. He had a great pass on the Mikael Granlund shorthanded goal, which was quite nice to see. He keeps up his point streak and was all in all right here tonight. When it comes to Fabian Zetterlund, I liked the energy that Zetterlund was bringing. I thought he was skating with some purpose, and he was definitely trying here tonight. The problem is that, as I've already mentioned multiple times, the Stars, they're closing in on him very, very quickly. So while he did get at times the puck in these dangerous spots, or at least these semi-dangerous spots, he was usually unable to really finish the play because he'd have one or two Stars quickly converging on him, and he wouldn't be able to get it off fast enough. So that's going to be something to adapt here. If you are Fabian Zetterlund, you need to play with a little bit more speed when you're going up against much tougher competition here. But again, I can't say it was a bad game. I thought he was all right. When it comes to the Sharks' second line, we have Smith, Celebrini, and Goodrow. And we'll start off with Barclay Goodrow, and I won't actually revisit the well of the common criticism here, because the thing is that when you talk about, Goodrow is not offensively talented enough to be playing with Celebrini and Smith, this is true, but it's also not so much the fault of Goodrow, but it is more so the fault of the coaching staff for putting him in this position. Goodrow, it is well known that he's not going to be able to keep up. He's not going to be able to catch a pass on his backhand, bring it to his forehand, change the angle, and then rip a shot top corner to take advantage of a great Celebrini or Smith pass. It's just not going to happen. But what the ideal reasoning for having him on the second line is twofold. The first of which is that he's going to bring a decent defensive game. Obviously, he's not like a Selke Trophy winner, but with his experience in the NHL through the playoffs, he is at least okay defensively, and he's above a player like Will Smith in that area. So that is one positive. But the second thing he brings is the ability to create some space in the offensive zone, or at least he should be able to do this by forechecking hard, winning battles, and being able to do that. He's not going to finish on plays, but he can potentially start plays for his two significantly more skilled line mates. But we didn't really see any of that here tonight. Sure, it's a tough challenge against a Dallas Stars team, but Goodrow needs to be able to bring more of a spark if he even wants to somewhat justify his position on this second line. It is the reason for why he is put here by Ryan Warsofsky. It's not to be offensively able, it is to be a space creator for these two younger players so that they can use their talent, and he just doesn't do that here tonight, even remotely so, and that's what makes this disappointing. He's not the only guilty party of this second line. There were other struggles in elsewhere, but he's definitely not innocent in all of this. When it comes to the other winger on this line, we do have Will Smith. There's good news and bad news with Smith. The good news is that he does seem to keep his confidence up here. He's still trying to make these aggressive passes that do have a smart idea behind them. I can certainly see what he's going for in a lot of these situations. The bad news, however, is that more often than not tonight, these passes just simply did not work out. He probably had at least 4 or 5 giveaways here, not always like egregious ones that led to great chances against, but ones that he needs to be more responsible with. These passes are going to be quickly closed in on by these Dallas Stars players. If you're not putting them with a lot of purpose and a lot of juice on them, and you're just making these kind of weak backhand passes or just soft passes to the middle of the ice, 9 times out of 10, someone is going to be there defensively. That is a learning experience here tonight for Will Smith, that going up against a team that is likely to make the playoffs, perhaps even yet another deep run in their future, they know better than to just allow these talented individuals. They played against the Edmonton Oilers last year. They know what McDavid, they know what Draisaitl can do. Do you think Will Smith in his 17th game of the season is going to be able to pull those types of things off? Not really the case. So you need to be smarter with puck management there. Smith was not here tonight. While I won't say that he's reverted back to game 1 of the regular season Smith, far from it. I still liked the confidence, but it was not the best game. When it comes to the final line mate here, we do have Macklin Celebrini, and he, kind of like with Will Smith, had some struggles at times in those areas. There were some rough giveaways. There were some moments in which he was closed in on very, very quickly, but the good news here when it comes to Macklin Celebrini is that he is such a great player. He is such a special player that even in games where there isn't a lot of space to work with and where he is at times getting shut down, he still manages to have moments in which you say, what a great play by Celebrini. We saw late in the third period, he makes a slick move up at the blue line to create a ton of space for himself around a Stars defender. We see a play, I can't remember if it's in the second or the first period, where he also makes a very nice move through the slot. For whatever reason, he doesn't take the shot in this situation. He kind of just brings it below the goal line, but if he did take the shot, it could have been a decent chance. So there are still moments of brilliance from Macklin Celebrini, which is quite nice to see, but obviously to play a full 60-minute well-rounded game, there's still progress to be made, which is to be expected for a player just playing their 9th game of the year and of their career. When it comes to the Sharks' third line, we have Wenberg, Toffoli, and Dellandrea. Interestingly enough, this third line was used in more of a defensive standpoint. They actually started the first couple of periods of this game. I can't remember if they started the third, but they did start first and second periods. So it is quite clear there is a reliance on these 3 players to be defensively responsible, and I think that really goes to Alex Wenberg in particular. And I actually thought they did a pretty good job in that area. As I mentioned earlier on, outside of a few egregious mistakes made by the team in general, they actually did a relatively solid job of defending against the Dallas Stars, and this third line was a part of that. They also did get some offensive chances. I was actually somewhat of a fan of Toffoli's game here tonight. It wasn't spectacular. It wasn't like close to Mikael Granlund or anything like that, but he had some shots. He made a great pass to Dellandrea in front, I believe in the first or the second period. Again, can't remember there. So I thought Toffoli was all right. Alex Wenberg, I thought, also played a pretty good game. His playmaking still continues to be something that is beneficial here when playing with a strong scorer like Tyler Toffoli. When it comes to Ty Dellandrea, it was a bit of a weird substitution because while the lines were kept together for the start of this game, there was one small change that they made, which was that later on in this game, Dellandrea was dropped to the 4th line and Cunnin was brought up to the 3rd, and I really didn't understand this choice from Warsofsky. Usually when you see a move like this, it's either because the player who gets demoted is playing poorly or the player who gets promoted is playing well, or I guess the third reason if you want to just like spark something in the team because nobody is playing well. But none of these 3 things were actually the case. I thought Dellandrea was looking pretty good. I actually thought he was better than Luke Cunnin here tonight, so the swap makes 0 sense from that perspective. And if you did want to spark some offense, Dellandrea and Cunnin swapping is really not the place to do it. If you really wanted to, you could either like break up the Lund line, which would be a little bit extreme, or you could just have, Goodrow and Toffoli swap. You could have maybe someone like Smith get swapped with Toffoli, something like that to maybe get some offense going. Dellandrea and Cunnin, this is like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. This is not actually going to accomplish anything, and so I thought that was an odd choice. Like I said, Dellandrea actually playing okay this game. When it comes to the Sharks' fourth line, they've been really, really good as of late, led by Carl Grundstrom, but against a tougher team like tonight, they didn't really get to have those same level of rush chances, those same forechecking shifts in the offensive zone. I won't say they were awful. I still thought they had some okay plays, but there was clearly nowhere near where they were at the previous one. Grundstrom did even have a couple of mistakes, which have been rare to see from him over these last few games. I'll say the good news about someone like Klim Kostin is that previously, and especially against a really good team, I thought he'd revert back to the super inconsistent Klim Kostin. While he did end up taking a penalty, which was not a good look, he otherwise was solid enough defensively. It still wasn't a good line for the Sharks, but it wasn't as bad as maybe it could have been. When it comes to the Sharks, from a defensive standpoint, we have the top pairing of Jake Walman and Cody Ceci. Walman, as per usual, a lot of highs, a lot of lows. This is, as I've mentioned in my grading video, very reminiscent of like an Erik Karlsson type of player. Obviously, Walman doesn't have the same level of offensive talent, but in the sense that he can make these strong plays. He can step up in the defensive zone to really completely interrupt a play and get it going the other way quickly for an offensive chance. He can score goals. He can get points. We saw him get this goal, 12 points on the year now, and I think 16 or so games because he missed a few due to healthy scratch and injury. So he's keeping up offensively, but from a defensive standpoint, there are still the major giveaways. We saw pretty much an identical type of play that led to one of these Dallas Stars goals, in which he has the puck below the goal line, behind the net. There's not really much pressure, and yet he gives this puck away anyway, leads to that Stars goal. There's just no excuses for a play like that. So still some areas for Walman to clean up in. Definitely some rough moments defensively, but I guess from an offensive perspective, he's still been all right. So you can't be too upset like you would be with like Ferraro and Ruda, who bring 0 in that area. When it comes to his defensive partner, we do have Cody Ceci, who I do think was above Jake Walman, but as per usual, we do have Cody Ceci, or at least he was above Jake Walman in terms of defensive play. But as usual for Cody Ceci, we do have those weird decisions that continue to come out. On this Jamie Benn goal, he's sort of by the side of the net, and for yet another game, he decides to aggressively chase behind the net in a situation where he really shouldn't be doing so, and that leads to this Jamie Benn goal. I don't understand why the decision was made, but so Ceci seems to be sort of secure for making one of these types of move at least once per game. So while he's otherwise was all right defensively here tonight, that's something that needs to be cleaned up for sure. When it comes to the second defensive pairing, we have Ferraro and Liljegren. We'll start off with Liljegren. We did see a small breakout offensively. He had a great move down the middle, which actually drew a penalty in the second period of this game, which was quite nice to see. But for those of us who were maybe hoping for more of an offensive production from Liljegren since arriving from Toronto, it hasn't really happened all that much. There hasn't been a ton of really big offensive production. Jake Walman has been quite clearly above him in that area of the game, and we thought it would be a little bit closer at the very least. The good news at the very least, compared to, let's say, Kalen Addison, which was the Band-Aid fix from last season, Addison brought 0 offense and was also terrible defensively. At least Liljegren has been mostly responsible in the defensive zone. The case here once again tonight, I don't think there were any real egregious errors made by Liljegren, so that was quite nice. And I actually also want to transition that to his defensive partner Mario Ferraro, who I thought played his best game of the season the other night against Detroit. Not saying a ton, because Ferraro has been mostly terrible this season, but still, it was a nice positive, and he carries that in here tonight against a much better Dallas Stars team. I'm thinking, oh, he's going to get clearly abused as per usual, but Ferraro was actually rather okay. There weren't multiple terrible turnovers. In fact, I can't even remember more than like one turnover that he made in this game, but though perhaps I've got like a short-term memory loss in that case. But for Ferraro, I thought he was actually pretty good. He wasn't quite at the level that we have seen players like CC and even Liljegren reach, and Walman, of course, reach at times this season. But compared to where he has been most of the year, he was significantly better. If he can actually just play at this like 5-on-10 performance on a consistent basis for the Sharks, you know, he wouldn't actually be that much of a hated player. When it comes to the Sharks' final defensive pairing, we have Ruda and Thrun, and I'll carry this into Ruda. This is probably going to be my least popular video simply because I've complimented Ferraro, and I'm about to compliment Ruda as well because I thought he also looked good. You know, there weren't major mistakes, and what I really liked about Ruda is that he was actually willing to jump up into the play multiple times. He had a great setup with Macklin Celebrini passes to him. He makes the quick pass to Will Smith for a great chance on that. I believe this was back in the first period. Ruda actually being aggressive. Usually he's more of that stay-at-home guy. You don't really view him as much of a strong skater, and yet he was willing, he was active in this game. I liked that from him, and there weren't the major mistakes either from a defensive standpoint. So Ruda was maybe not the best defenseman for the Sharks, but he was definitely up there in the upper half. And then when it comes to his defensive partner, Henry Thrun, there were struggles for sure. The first period in particular stands out really poorly. He had a couple of penalties. He also had a really, really bad giveaway where he literally looks at Jamie Benn behind the net and then decides to pass to him anyway. I don't know what was going through his mind. Very questionable decision there for Henry Thrun. So he continues to have these moments on these third pairings where he's struggling when he didn't have this on the Sharks' top pairing over those last few games. I don't know exactly what's happening. He did manage to, at the very least, settle in as the second and third period went on, and he ended up playing an okay enough game, but still that first period wasn't great. He also had a weird choice as well in the third period on one of the empty net goals, the second empty net goal, where he just gave the puck away very easily. It didn't really matter at that point. The Sharks were probably going to lose anyway, but still just a kind of strange choice, I would say. So not the best game for Thrun for sure. And then when it comes to the Sharks goaltender, we have Mackenzie Blackwood. Blackwood, back in the Sharks' first matchup against the Dallas Stars this season, was the Sharks MVP. He kept them alive. He brought them into overtime. He brought them into the shootout before dropping it there. Here tonight, he didn't need to be as good, and honestly, he wasn't either. I think the Sharks kind of helped out a lot in front of him. He wasn't faced with tons of high-danger chances. It's not as though he faced 50 shots and 25 high-danger shots. He really only had to make a few nice saves here tonight. And honestly, on a couple of the goals that he let in, I won't blame him on the Ben one, and I won't necessarily blame him on the Johnston one either, even though it was perhaps a possible save. The Robertson one was one he definitely could have had, and in the end you could definitely make the argument that he lost the goaltending battle here against Jake Ottinger. But that will do it for this review. The Sharks will be back in action tomorrow against the St. Louis Blues. This is not the first time the Sharks will have faced them. That happened back in Game 1 of the regular season, a game in which the Sharks held a 4-1 lead going into the third before completely blowing it and losing it in the overtime. So the Sharks will be looking for some revenge there. On top of that, we of course are on Yaroslav Askarov watch, while Vanacek, I believe, did make the trip here to St. Louis, so it is technically possible he comes back and plays that game. I'd be very surprised if the Sharks went through the trouble of bringing in Askarov, having him travel, and then not giving him a game, especially since he is the future starter of the San Jose Sharks, so I expect to see him in nets tomorrow. Class dismissed.